Well, welcome everybody to our online program on addiction and recovery from the Sunshine Coast Health Center up here in Powell River, BC. And we'll start out with Viktor Frankl's definition of addiction. So Frankl said, addiction was a response to living a life that lacked personal meaning. So the solution is pretty obvious. Basically, it's get a life. And the idea behind that was if you could get a life, if you could get this feeling from being alive that you were productive and it was a joy to get up in the morning, then what you would discover is that you would have no interest in the addiction anymore because it's no longer serving its purpose. So if that's true, if Frankl is right on this one, then we should be able to look around people who talked about addiction and find out if this idea of living a meaningless life is accurate. And on the other hand, is the solution really just to get a life? Okay, so we'll give, in this online program, we'll look at a few people to see if they fit the pattern. Well, there's a book out by a guy by the name of Patrick DeWitt, who's, I think he's a Vancouver writer. And it's a very interesting book. It's called Ablutions. And it's actually a novel. And the story is this bartender who's working at a bar and he's watching all these different people come in the bar and describing them. And he himself begins falling into alcoholism. And that's basically what the novel's all about. It's just a series of sketches, mainly of different people, but also a bit about the bartender who's the narrator and what it's like for him to actually become an alcoholic. But what's really interesting about this book is that when you read it, you don't really get a sense that the bartender really knows very much about what it means to be a human being. He's great at describing people, like he'll describe people in the bar, but he'll only describe like behaviors and things like that. He's not very good at reading people's minds or figuring out what they're really feeling or things like that. And even with himself, he just reports on, well, I did this or I did that. There's no real detail there on what he's going through himself. And this is, Frankl would say that is an indication of a meaningless life, because for Frankl, it was foundationally important to really have a good sense of who you were as a human being. Because if you didn't have that, it was impossible to live meaningfully. And this bartender, he's a very good example, and that book is a very good example of someone who's trapped in an addiction, and even before they actually fell into the addiction, that they really have such a weak sense of who they are as people. And even when he looks out into the world, the bartender, all he's really seeing is behaviors. Anyway, the book is actually got a lot of good critical reviews, and it's really wonderfully entertaining, some of the characters he talks about. But for our purposes, it's just a good example of someone who really doesn't know himself and therefore could not possibly be living a meaningful life. So in that count, he seems to reflect what Viktor Frankl was talking about. Anyway, that's it for this program, and we'll be back next time with another one on Viktor Frankl's, examples of Viktor Frankl's ideas.